This panel session is entitled Fix the Individual, and it really feeds on from the previous session. We talk about recruitment and talking about how do we make a difference, how do we make a change. And there's an institutional aspect of it, of course, there's a knowledge aspect of it which came out, there's also an individual aspect of it. So the three ladies I have sitting here with me now are going to be talking about their experiences, both their own personal journeys, but also in terms of what can we do to support the recruitment and retention of young female talent. I'm going to introduce first of all Dr. Rina Arshad, who's the head of Moray House School of Education, University of Edinburgh. Who's going to kick us off by talking through her personal journey.
Okay. Right. This is where I need my glasses as well to see. This is terrible. This is an age issue, not a gender issue. Okay. I wanted to start by actually saying that whilst today is about fixing the individual, my personal priority is actually fixing the organization. But because we're on the panel about the individual, I'll keep to that theme. And I want to start with myself. In 1999, I was in higher education, not at the University of Edinburgh, so I hasten to say that, but at Moray House, which merged with the University of Edinburgh. And I decided at that point that nobody was looking after my career within my College of Education. So I had to do it myself. And I was 39, and I decided to apply for public appointments in non-departmental public bodies and big government bodies, but to apply for them. And I decided to go to my boss and ask him for his advice, the most senior person in the college. And he said to me, they're not really looking for people like you. They are looking for business people. So I thought, okay. So I applied anyway. And eventually I got an interview. And I went back to see this man, and I said to him, I've got an interview. And you could see his face. He looked a bit surprised, but he tried to hide it. And then he said, and I said, can you give me some interview tips, please? And he was very good. He was very helpful. He talked at me for about 20 minutes, half an hour, without stopping. And then he said, don't get your hopes too high. It's not people like you they're looking for. So off I went to the interview, and eventually I came back and I got the appointment onto the board. And it was to the Scottish Higher and Further Education Funding Council. That's the body that funds higher education in Scotland. So I went back to see him, to thank him for giving me his advice. At which point he said to me, well done, but don't forget, you got the appointment because you're a woman, and also because you're an ethnic minority. Because in the UK, we're trying to raise the numbers of ethnic minorities as well as women. So he says, you're actually quite a bargain, because they've got two in one, so their statistics will look better on gender, and it will look better on ethnic minorities as well. So that's a fabulous start for 1999. And I'm thinking, this is 2015, will it be any better? I actually think it is going to be better. I think it will be. Because I think now I've got some senior women role models to go and speak to, which I didn't have in 1999, or I didn't know who they were. So I think the mentoring initiatives, all these initiatives that various organizations have been putting in, there is some traction, there is some development and going forward. Peer support networking, I don't think you can absolutely say they don't work, because they do. So there are important formal mechanisms to put in, and so if you haven't got that, I would say that's one route to look at. Also, I think women tend to worry about taking on risk and leadership. And so one of the work that I think we can do is actually to help women think about those landmines, those potholes that are going to be about, so that you don't actually go through them, you jump over them, or you go around the side. And you need that kind of mentoring and networking and information, not just from women mentors, but also male mentors. I remembered when I was starting out, when I got onto the Higher Education Funding Council, I had loads and loads of paperwork that used to come every board meeting, lots of paperwork. And I panicked because I would read through this paperwork and think, Actually, some of them I haven't a clue what they're talking about. I don't understand. Am I stupid? And I remember then one day just sitting very quietly at the council, not saying very much and thinking, they must think I'm quite stupid because I don't speak up very much. But it's not that I was being stupid. I was thinking and listening to what the men were saying and other people. And this man sitting next to me, he just tapped my hand and he said, "Do you know what this is about?" And I looked at him and said, "No." I said, "Do you?" And he said, "No, I don't know either." And he and I then started talking. Now, his name was Jim McCall, and he's now one of the most successful businessmen in Scotland and not the world. He's a multimillionaire billionaire. So I thought, well, if multimillionaire billionaire doesn't understand it either, that's fine. But he hadn't realized his one small question, what a difference it made for me in terms of my journey. So I think someone to point out that you don't have to be an expert at everything. You don't have to go into the pothole or to be blown up in the landmine. You can actually jump around it, walk around it, and that's very important. So I think in 2015, that's that. The other is, now that I am head of school, a dean of the School of Education, which is a large school. We have about 400 staff. We have 3,000 students, so it's quite a large school within the University of Edinburgh. One of the ways I'm encouraging some of the younger people, but also, and within that there'll be men as well as women, is actually talent spotting and looking around to see who might be possible in succession planning, and then putting in place for them the support structures, going to talk to them, or if I can't talk to them because I'm on an interview panel, I will encourage my middle managers to go and talk to them, because some of these people haven't thought that it would be possible. But once they're appointed, I don't just leave them there. So I'm thinking here in particular of a young woman that's recently taken over as a deputy director of Knowledge Exchange in my school. And I see her once every few weeks, maybe once every 6 weeks, just to have a cup of coffee with her. For all of you in this room who are leaders, I think it means so much to junior members of staff when somebody who's in a leadership position actually takes some time with them. We maybe in our busy diaries don't think it's important, but those individuals really value it. So the reason I'm seeing this young woman once every 6 weeks is partly to encourage her, but partly to make sure I haven't forgotten. She stepped up, don't forget, to take this role. So my job is to make sure that I'm there for her in her development. So safety nets, I think, are important. And safety nets are particularly important if you want people to take risks. And men as well as women, but women in particular, who might avoid risk-taking, may find that if they know that if they make a mistake, they're not going to be sacked, they're not going to be told off or ridiculed, that there is a safety net, they can, as long as they don't make the same mistake again and again, I think then they're more likely to come forward and actually make that difference and take that leap of faith, really. The other sorts of things that I think are putting in place is not just talent spotting, but it's also about encouraging people to really reach for the skies and raise their eyes above what they see. So one example would be early career researchers, mainly women, I have to say, in my school. And I look at the way that they apply for grants, and they apply for small grants. And they do this month after month, year after year. And I'm thinking, why are you not going for the £1.5 million grants? Why are you just going for the £20,000 grants? Because those £20,000 grants are not going to, at the end of the day, look good on your CV if that's all you do. You must find that £1.5 million grant, or at least be part of a team that starts doing it, because that will impact on your promotional prospects and then eventually onto the leadership ladder. So encourage him to really think about it, connecting them with other men or women who are in these large teams so that they're part of teams that can apply for these big grants. So different ways. It was really interesting in the session before lunch, I think. It could just have been the session before. The day has gone on for so long, I can't remember who said what now. But the term, I think it was in our actual panel in the one before, and somebody used the term self-effacement. Rather, the fact that women generally do a lot of the work, but they are very self-effacing. They don't take credit for it. And they see that as being too big for your head, or being pushy, or being, just don't do it. I actually say to a lot of the colleagues, men and women actually as well, but women in particular, if you've done the work, you take the credit for it. You can bring other people in with you. Their names can all be on the article that you're publishing or the project or the report, but you make sure you take the credit, because if you don't take it, somebody else will. So I think being pushy and actually helping them pass that self-effacement position is very important. I think that's probably as much as I'm going to say. I mean, the other thing that I will finish off is where I started off, which is my priority is actually cultural change within the institution. I don't, in the UK universities and in jobs like mine, the roles are generally for 3 to 5 years. So I have a short time in order to create that change. And it will be zero tolerance on sexism within campus, sexual harassment within campus. It will be zero tolerance on poor behavior on equality issues. I think we can lead from the front as leaders on this and help fixing both the structure the individual is working in, as well as providing them the structures and the platforms and the steps to go forward.
Thank you very much, Rena. A lot of what you were saying there kind of resonates with me. As being a young female academic once upon a time in my life, around getting those people who were supportive of me and saying, go for it, you know, look at this opportunity and go for that bigger opportunity. And, you know, I'll give an anecdotal example of having one line manager who was a female doctor academic who was very much, we'll co-write articles together, we'll have bylines together, we'll go out there, let's do this. But when I was working as a research fellow with 2 senior male doctors, their names going on the article rather than my name going in the article, even though I was doing the bulk of the work for it. So I think that, you know, it is that example of being assertive and saying, actually, no, I have done this work. I am going to put my name on this. So yeah, can I go back X number of years and fix that issue now? That'd be great. I'm actually going to now turn to Dr. Rajni Gupta, who's the Vice Chancellor of Symbiosis International University, kind of really share some of her experiences as well around that and some of the interventions which you have, looked to try and introduce, but also would you encourage?
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you to the British Council for giving me this opportunity to interact with everyone. We've been talking since the morning about a lot of issues, and when I look at fix the individual, I look at the fact that we've been talking about why do we need to fix the individual. I think all our attention since the morning and maybe the last session that I had attended I think last year, also spoke about why do we need to fix the individual. I think all of us know that the pipeline gets smaller. There are many women who get into higher education, but as they move ahead, you find that the number becomes smaller and smaller. The why is very well known, and a lot of attention has been focused over here. But I have been wondering about 2 other things, and that is, which individual should we fix? Okay, so when I say which individual should we fix, my first attention was drawn to the fact that there are not too many men over here in this audience. So we don't really know what the men folk think. And I think it's important for us to know, it's okay for the women to say that, this discrimination happens and we bear the brunt of a lot of things. But I would really like to know, what is it that men think about this? And I think somewhere that has not really come out. So I think maybe we need to understand from the men, do they think that there is discrimination? Do they think that they are giving a fair chance to women all the time? Or do they think that, this is just a figment of our imagination and they're being very fair to us and everything that ought to come to us has already been given to us? So I'm not very sure whether if we need to fix the men, the mindset of the men. Because I do know that in a country like India, very, very strong, patriarchal societies, where a lot of people that I come across come with the mindset that, in fact, I don't know whether I have shared this earlier, but when I joined my first job, I found that I was very young, and I had this professor who was in his 50s. And the first thing he asked me was, why have you joined this institution? Why have you joined as a teacher? You've taken away a job of a young man. So he needs to earn a living. You don't need to do that. So somewhere this was the first time that I started even thinking that why is it that men think that women cannot play a role in the workplace? So I think these are very deep-rooted issues which one will need to think about. So when we say fix the individual, who's the individual we want to fix? Are we also talking about talking to young mothers, because they are the ones who will instill these values in the young children? Because I think that's where the change needs to begin. If we are talking about, I guess everyone in this room will say that, you know, they had parents who were very supportive, parents who built in a sense of democracy, a sense of equality, and that is why we are where we are today. I guess everyone in this room will second that. And if that is so, is it that there are parents out there who don't instill this kind of equality in their children, and that is why we are where we are? So I think, again, a question of the mindset. So which individual are we talking about? Are we talking about women ourselves, because we also have a role to play in our own organizations, where we need to also make sure that we provide equal opportunities or more opportunities to our women employees. So if I look at my own organization, I realize that I was just counting while we were talking in the morning, we have about 28 institutions under the Symbiosis. And I was actually surprised when I counted and I found that 12 out of the 28 directors are women. And I wondered, you know, I heard Patrick speaking about unconscious bias. I don't know whether whether they are there. I know they are there because they are efficient. I know they are there because they are the best in the field. But am I a victim of unconscious bias is something that I'm thinking about now. Is it that I'm looking at people I'm comfortable with, and that's why I have women leaders along with me? I don't know. Maybe that's a topic for me to think about and research. So when I'm looking at which individual to fix, I really need to contemplate and decide where do I move ahead from here. From which individual, I think the more important question is how. How do we fix this individual? If I'm looking at men to be sensitized, where do I begin? Are we to begin in schools? Are we to begin in colleges? Are we to begin with adults? By then their mindsets are pretty well set, and it's very difficult for them to make a change. It is what they hear in school and in homes that really makes an impact on young people. Somewhere I feel that change needs to happen right in the beginning. It needs to happen when a child is young. The child needs to hear about equality. The child needs to know that, I mean, in the Indian context, it has always been, and I know it is also there in several other countries in the world, that it is always the male child who's seen to be superior. He is taught to believe that he is superior. And that goes a long way in creating these mindsets which get carried over generations. In the morning, Jude said, speak out. Where do I speak out? At the workplace, or at social gatherings, or at various other fora? Where do we speak out? How do we do this? Because I think it's important for a forum like this to actually decide the action points. What is it that we are going to do? We know what we need to do, but how are we actually planning to set about this task? Because it's very, very critical for us to make a beginning. I think we have very like-minded people sitting over here, and all of us have addressed the issue, and we are aware of what the challenges are. And in the morning when I heard some of the other speakers, I realized that this is not just a South Asian phenomenon that we are talking about. It seems to be global, and if it is so, then I think we need to join hands to decide how we want to tackle it. Maybe the challenges in the South Asian context are a little different because cultures are different. But to that extent, I think we will need to, I was thinking the other day that if you look at young children in India today, you'll realize that all of them are very, very health conscious. They all go to gyms and they're all very, very active. And I started wondering, when did this happen? How did this happen? I was not a health freak, and none of my friends were when we were in school or college. But somewhere down the line, if you look at young people today, you find that almost all of them want to go to the gym and they want to be fit and they want to be healthy. And I'm sure my Indian colleagues over here will agree with me. How did this change happen? Why did it happen? If it's possible for this change to happen in one generation, I think we need to investigate how these things happen and maybe try and see how we can use that or leverage that experience for making sure that we do something that we want done. And of course, I think the only last other point that I thought I would leave behind was when we are talking about changing the mindset, I think everyone around us needs to be equally responsible. And I'm referring here to the media that we are looking at around us. If you look at the multiple TV channels that are there in Indian languages, in some of the Indian languages, you will find that the portrayal of the woman is extremely undesirable in several cases. And I think this goes also a long way in trying to change if you portray a woman in a stereotype. And I think that gets imprinted. Maybe a lot of people don't want to watch it, but they watch it nonetheless. It's young, old, everyone who watches it, and I think that impacts the way people think, the way people react. So I think I'll cut it short over here, and I'll hand it over to the next person. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rajni. Some interesting reflections there of, which individual trying to fix? Is it the woman? Is it the man? Is it society, actually, at the end of the day, that we're trying to fix? Is that really the core? Is that what we need to look at? Some of the behaviours we talked about there, about speaking up, being assertive, etc. Where, when, how, knowing the barriers to push, knowing when to be assertive, but also when to not be too aggressive. Those are challenges for us. And the point you made about this is not just a South Asian, this is not just an Indian context of South Asian contracts. I'd also make the context, it's not just higher education. It is industry, it is the economy in general, it is politics. It goes beyond just higher education. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Diana Werman, who is from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development in the UK, who's the policy advisor, sits on numerous boards there to the UK Advisor in the UK government, or has in the past, around diversity. Diana.
Thanks. Right. Leave me with a big question about all the energy that's going to be devoted to making a difference on this agenda. Then I think one really needs to be thinking about what kind of leaders you really need for tomorrow, because everything is changing. You talked about change, and it's changing so terribly quickly. And what you don't want to do is waste a load of time and effort on creating the leaders that were relevant in yesterday's context. So when everything is changing really, really fast, the question is, how can you fix someone against that changing scenario? And do you really have to enable people to be very responsive to those circumstances so they step up to the plate, as we say? Because, leaders are supposed to be born out of a context, not necessarily created from nothing. And so what strikes me as being very important going forward is the ability to nurture someone to develop the confidence or the willingness or the eagerness or the motivation or the aspiration to get really involved in something where they aspire to make a difference, no matter what level it is at. It may end up being a leader at some level, a lower level or a higher level. But if it's something that really excites them and motivates them, that's the kind of person you want to make a difference in any type of organisation. And the kind of person who's going to fit that space is more likely to have self-confidence and motivation and aspiration if they have got the ingredients you mentioned about support from families, or they actually see there is a chance for them and they know they could do it. So if they come from really deprived backgrounds where everybody's always been disaffected, their chances are very much more difficult. If they're in an environment where there's more positive thinking, more, well, I can do it, or you can encourage people to think can do, they're more likely to be able to go forward in the right kind of way. But I think that they also need to be the kind of people, as we're moving forward into the middle of the current century, 21st century, that can adapt and change really, really fast, and that they have the confidence to make a decision about a set of circumstances that may be very different from the ones they're used to. And that's that issue about being prepared to take a risk, but on the basis of really sound knowledge and experience from the past, and using that to make a decision that's better informed going forward. So the hesitation I have across all sorts of organisations is to do that very thing. So it's not about fixing somebody against yesterday's bundle of stuff. It's about enabling someone to develop themselves and be motivated to move forward, and giving them the chance to do it and seeing there is an opportunity. So that requires very different leadership now amongst all of us, and different ways of enabling talent to develop. So if we do just let's fix it, the past was right, we are going to get it wrong, I think. So what kind of behaviours do we think we might need tomorrow? That's very important to predict, and very difficult trying to get insights about what tomorrow's leadership should look like. And I think it would look different in different contexts, moving away from an autocratic, very hierarchical organisation to one that's very much dependent on knowledge sharing, development of ideas, especially across different functional expertise, where you really want an answer to something that's never even been imagined. And that's the way the world is going, and it will have to go if we're going to survive with growing populations with limited resources. So you really need to encourage people to be more prepared to work with each other and learn from each other, and encourage others to actually enable that to actually happen. Because the prediction in the UK, for example, is that our children are going to be doing jobs that aren't even invented yet. So I think we have to think that far ahead and be prepared to accept that. And in terms of academia, all that fantastic knowledge must be capable of being put to use going forward, I would have thought, and not get hung up on the kind of hierarchies that have grown in that particular sector, which can themselves be inhibitors. Just because we've used them before and it sounds as if they're okay, we fall back on them, then we're not necessarily going to be marching forward in the right kind of way. So yeah, identifying the behaviours. So what examples of behaviours can we come up with that might be very different from the ones we would have had yesterday? So, and not an easy answer, I don't think, but the mechanisms we need to put in place to get to that, because obviously it's a lot of listening we need to go on to actually kind of predict where we want to be. And then if we're getting that right, or nearly right, constantly revising it and sense checking it, and then making sure that we create the mechanisms to get us there. And the mechanisms we've learnt to use over the past, up until now, have been quite good, but their very selves aren't. They are actually informed by biases from yesterday, whether we like to admit it or not. Whether we like to admit it or not, merit itself is fraught with bias. And what was good for yesterday isn't necessarily going to be good based on merit for tomorrow. So the kind of thing you might use in sophisticated selection processes, for example, psychometric tests. Now, do they actually work in the future context? Are you measuring the right thing? Are they valid? Actually, they may be reliable, but are they valid if the context is changing? Who's evaluating the success of those predictors? What's the point of finding out those facts if they're not going to tell you anything tomorrow? When you're talking about finding out how people relate to each other in group exercises, what's going on in those group exercises? Is it the mix and the blend of people and how they interact and the way you infer how that person responds? Is somebody very good at game playing and the political agenda, and do they get pushed aside from the actual intrinsic knowledge they may have about the problem? All of those things we perhaps need to be much more curious about to make sure we're not missing out on somebody who's going to have serious value tomorrow. So I think what I'm saying is, don't be dependent on the tools we've been using up until now and thinking they're sacrosanct, because they're not. So you've talked about needing to think, and how did change happen in connection with what you were talking about? How does it happen? Suddenly, I think, especially nowadays, you've got social media and things bite really fast with people who use it, especially young people. They talk to each other at a distance, and quickly you get a simple change that you hadn't noticed becomes a tsunami. So actually being alert to that kind of stuff is important in the leadership skills, isn't it? Because it tells you where you actually need to go. So I think curiosity has to be fundamental as a behavior. Curiosity, confidence and courage has to be fundamental to the basis of any leader, no matter what level they're at. And the ability to listen, I would predict, is very important as well, because you're actually going to not know all the answers yourself as a leader. You're going to be dependent on your team to get things right. But somebody at the end of the day, in a tight corner, has to stand up and make that decision. How do you know you've made the right one unless you've listened? So it's another big thing. They sound soft, but they're really, really hard to deal with. And some leader that's going to actually, if they're curious, encourage others to go and find out and bring the stories back. And someone as a leader who's going to have to be able to get others to work together really well, to develop the right behaviors as a group, so that that's going to be based on, we talked this morning about positive conflict management. Not all conflict is bad. If it's bad, you don't want it, really. But good conflict management, because different views and ideas will raise the energy in the room and people will spark off each other. And certainly in an academic world, that's got to be good, hasn't it? So getting a leader to understand how to motivate people and interest them in working with each other and exciting them about that. How do we do it? And organisations like Microsoft are now near one of our biggest stations, King's Cross, huge development area, and huge capacity for actually enabling companies like Microsoft to work together with others from other disciplines, because they know that that gives a great deal of synergy to the ideas that they're developing. People who wouldn't normally work together because of the positives they get out of it. So I think we've just got a whole new ballpark to play in, but learning from the skills we developed yesterday to map the future going forward.
Some interesting ideas about the behavioural side of things, and I'd like to pick up on a couple of things. I would like to pick up on the point you made there about how do we assess and how do we benchmark those kind of things. If it involves new ways of assessment of the skill set, are the current recruitment procedures that we use to identify people fit for purpose? Rowena, you're going no right now, so would you like to expand on why you say no?
Well, I was talking to my colleague Dee, who's an expert here on leadership, and one of the things we said is we haven't defined exactly the point you made about what kind of leader we want. So, for example, the message that I give out in the 2 years that I have been dean at the school, very clear message: I am not interested in anybody who is only going to want promotions on the basis of being selfish, so that their own careers can progress and nobody else. And both men and women, there are both in this, where they get to the top and they pull the ladder up, they don't help the next person along. And the message that I'm giving very clearly is I am not interested. You might be the most fantastic person, you might have got the best research council grants from Nuffield or Wellcome or whoever, but if that is your attitude, you can go and be a top-class researcher, but you will not be a senior leader within this institution. And I think that message has got round. We have one or two characters about like that who think very strongly of themselves. They've got nowhere. Their voices have become a minority. And I think, therefore, the listening, the collegiate, the networking, they are not weak. I was told, before I got this job, the person who prevented me getting the deputy head of school job was actually a woman. And the reason she gave me was that my university, and at this time it was Edinburgh University, she said to me, people within the higher up at the university think that you're weak. That is why you're not going to get the job as deputy head of school. And I thought, no, it's because I'm going to show you up, because actually I have a different style of leadership. So I think it is not fit for purpose, because the gung-ho, selfish type of leadership style, I think it's on its way out, because there are many clever people around. You're not the top of the tree anymore. You're simply there to facilitate and guide.
I think that's right, and not everybody wants to identify with that kind of role model, so we have to be cautious of putting it up as this is an example of what we want to achieve. So in terms of the leadership characteristics or traits, the more consensual things, not being confident or not being pushy when you've got it right. It's almost like it's a balance, a mixture of different traits, which is much better. So the self-promotional type, not necessarily a good idea, unless it's a very special set of circumstances where that might win. So it's a little bit like that phrase we have, do you use it as well? Horses for courses, don't dismiss anything as totally irrelevant, but be very prepared to accept that that's not the final answer and it's not sacrosanct for every set of circumstances. So that's where we've got to be very creative going forward. And the risk-taking bit is having a go. If it doesn't work, learn from hindsight and change it, because you're not going to get everything right off base. And I think those kind of conversations are actually okay to have now, whereas once upon a time, you'd be admitting defeat if you did say that. Oh, sorry, did you hear that? Yeah, once upon a time, if you admitted that, you don't know what you're talking about.
Rajni, I'm looking at you going, the way that the current structures, particularly in South Asia, are in terms of being a topper, getting the exams, getting the piece of paper, getting the degree, to become a senior academic, you need to have your PhD, you need to become a professor. Does that really encourage the type of behaviours that the ladies here have been talking about? Does that really encourage the type of behaviours or allow people to be able to demonstrate the kind of behaviours about collaboration, teamwork, creative thinking? Because the structure is very much about get your exams, be a success, get your next piece of paper, get the next piece of paper, get the next piece of paper.
Well, I think the education system makes you do certain things, but I guess the individual and his innate qualities is what we ought to be looking at. I think the way you nurture leaders, like they mentioned, if you're looking at, in my organization, for instance, you were looking at, if we are looking at who do I want to promote to the next level, I'm certainly looking at a person who is able to take the team along with that person. The academic qualifications are there, but what I'm looking at really is the leadership style, the leadership qualities, the ability to be able to support the other people in the organization, to encourage others to do well, to be a great team player, to project other people's work. And I think these are qualities which are also important. And therefore, I think that's what the leader really will need to do going forward.
But if you look at the schooling system onwards,
Yes.
we are always bemoaning the lack of creative thinking,
Yeah.
the lack of collaborative skills, which our children, especially in South Asia, are showing. Where are we giving the opportunity to develop those kind of skills? If it's not in schools, where are they getting the opportunity to develop this at an early age, so that when they become senior academics, they've actually developed a good range of tools about how to demonstrate those behaviours?
That is the unfortunate part, that I think we do not really train children or people to think in these fashions, especially in critical thinking or problem solving. And I think going forward, those are the skill sets that are critical for people to succeed or to do well in leadership positions. But I do feel that when people join an organization, if you are able to put them in, give them certain responsibilities, where you give them a responsibility to handle a task, it is definitely possible for them to display these kind of skill sets. Maybe when we talk of students, what we try and do with students is, at the postgraduate level, is to give them responsibilities to deal with multiple kinds of challenges, which encourages them to think differently, which gives them an opportunity to do things that they possibly never had to do in their life before. And I think this is where we try and separate the students from the kind of training that they may have received at the school level.
Well, that makes a load of sense to me, but it's very different from encouraging someone to focus simply on their own achievement, another piece of paper and another qualification, which is the way our education system is structured. And another thing, it just brings to my mind something I heard the other day about the challenges of the way our brains are hardwired by what we're constantly doing. So children who are playing an awful lot on Game Boys, who get very terribly good at it, but the space in their brain that focuses on that and makes them brilliant at it isn't used for the social interaction. And that, going forward, is a critical thing. So there are sorts of stuff happening, and you said, how does change happen? These sort of things are happening all the time. And if we need the kind of skills we're talking about now, we have to be alert to those kind of changes as well, and counter them if they're not going to be successful for us.
Can I just change tack slightly? I realise you're chairing it. I want to change tack. I want to come back to what you said about the fitness thing, and says within one generation we've managed to get people becoming fitter. And it's a bit like the no smoking and things. You know, within one generation, lots of things have changed. But I think the fundamental difference is that of power. Which person is prepared to give power up easily? There's no power in terms of getting fitter or actually smoking. Actually, it's a self-gain that your own life is going to be extended. So actually, there's a kind of internal clock that they're thinking, hey, this is for me, I'm doing it for me. If we're saying fixing the individual, and you talk about men as well as women, which one of us is prepared to give up power easily? And actually, the answer to that is it's very difficult to. So actually, it will require some men to be prepared to step aside, and yes, forego the pay packet that's there, the big salaries. It will require some women as well to step aside. We have a system at the moment in the UK where people are so stressed at work, quite a few of them are taking early retirement. So they're leaving earlier than I suppose they normally would, except that some of them are coming back as consultants or part-time. And I actually am thinking, you know, you've got a job, you retired, you took your payout at the end, and then you're coming back. And actually, that is something that is preventing another crew of people to step aside. Scottish education, and I realize this is potentially being YouTubed and sent round, Scottish education have got a whole host of retired men who are now coming back to advise the next cohort of Scottish education. He said, please, go and enjoy your life and do something else. You know, leave this next space for the next generation. So sorry, I'm being ageist here, I know.
I think I'd like to open the floor for our participants here to kind of give their views as well, and also raise questions if you have, but also make your views point. So can we have a microphone here, please? They've forgotten to bring the microphones, which is great. It's called audience participation.
Thank you, learned panelists, for your inputs about fixing individual. I am representing Sri Lanka. I want to share my experience in career guidance counseling and university placement of students. Actually, when it comes to, in all cases of selection and fixing women for any career or higher education, this must be based on capabilities, interests, behaviors, and the entire build-up of the individual. I think we have to consider the affinities, interests, skills, inborn talents according to the advocated by Howard Gardner, especially the word smartness, number smartness, people smartness, nature, music, body, and self-smartness. So I think profiling is very essential to select not only for higher education, even careers. When it comes to succession planning, this is very important. Profiling. Then we have to identify the whole person's skills, interests. It's a must. According to my experience, actually I have prepared a profile according to the Howard Gardner's theory. Then I can actually, extremely easy to streaming of students for various subject streams, even for careers, even to select undergraduate courses, not only undergraduate, even postgraduate courses. Actually, I helped senior professionals to select postgraduate courses because of this, the profiling. I think, according to the paper, now relates to the behaviors of capabilities of women and men to enable gender equity in higher education to happen, enhancing women's confidence, self-esteem, capacity building, is all based on these behaviors and capabilities. I think to fix the individual, it's a must to look for their behaviors and capabilities and skills and their entire profile. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a very relevant point to make, the rounded person, and rather than depending on their expertise at their particular function or knowledge base. And that's one of the lessons we learned in the UK in connection with the teaching profession itself, that we didn't just want all the brilliant teachers to become heads of, to go into a management role, because they didn't all want to do that anyway. And you really wanted to keep the ones who were good at the teaching and recognise that that was so valuable that you would offer them more reward to stay in that track. So if somebody wanted to develop a career to earn more money, maybe train them in the management style. So that's where you're actually differentiating the skill sets you need in your organisation and being much wiser and much smarter about it than you otherwise would be. And I think a lot of organisations need to think about that. And we would refer to it maybe as being really smart about job design, rather than going for everybody doing all of this because we always did, and sometimes we'll be good at bits of it, and sometimes we'll be really bad at some bits of it. Why not create a job where somebody's really doing all the bits they're great at, and put the other stuff to someone who's going to be brilliant at that stuff?
I really like the first speaker, Dr. Ravana, in terms of the point she raised. And I think it's extremely important for us to say, recognize. It's important to recognize that nobody is taking charge of you. It's not only important to recognize, then you take charge of yourself. And then when you're looking at fixing the individual, even if you're looking at the organizational level, the organization consists of individuals. So it is the individual who will have to lead the change. The moment you recognize, you take charge and you say, yes, if the organization is creating the barrier for me, I take charge and I work towards leading this change that I want the organization to actually have. And I think that confidence and that, that determination that you want to change things so that you're able to move forward is something that I think is extremely important. The other point that I wanted to raise, again connected to the points raised in the panel, is this whole question of mentoring. Because I think very often women do not recognize how mentoring can really make a change in their career. They often don't recognize that. They think that they can reach there just by themselves. It is that little bit lift that you get by mentoring that they can really reach there much quicker and much more efficient in terms of taking that position. And I think these two things are extremely important when one is looking. So I feel whether it is the organization or the individual, I think fundamentally it's the individual that makes the difference.
I was going to say, I think that's right, and I was going to say coaching is the other thing. So it's not necessarily about mentors, but somebody who can coach you and actually help you to gain your own self-confidence, to see things differently, and to start planning to go for it. So one of the things that, I don't know if some of you have had 360 reviews where your different members of staff do a review of who you are. And one of the things my boss, who's a woman boss now, said that she liked off our meetings when I meet with her, is I always come prepared with things I want to raise and talk with her about. And I actually learnt that, not from any mentor, from a coach. Somebody was coaching me. So coaching is the other mechanism to use.
I think I would agree completely that mentoring is extremely important. And I think we don't even sometimes realize that we are being mentored. You have someone who's supporting you, someone who's trying to give you an insight into the world of business. I know my boss, who was a male, was possibly training me for what I am today. Simple things like making sure that things are done in time. I mean, there was a time when I would feel that he's too much of a boss. He would make sure that he would come and stand at my table at 5 minutes to 9 to make sure that I reached my table at 9 o'clock. And he would tell me that you need to start work at 9 o'clock, not reach your table at 9 o'clock, start work at 9 o'clock. And I think somewhere these lessons that you learn, something that you imbibe, become your style as well as you go forward. And that is when you realize that the people whom you're training, whom you're coaching, they will carry forward some of the lessons that you give to them. I have had a couple of young girls whom I have had the occasion to work with for about 10 years now, and they have now matured into leadership positions. And it's extremely gratifying to see that they have been able to mature into excellent leaders. So I think coaching, mentoring is very satisfying when you are mentoring people. And also, of course, when you receive support, I think that goes a long way to make you what you are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving good ideas. I am Professor Asha Kadyan, Vice Chancellor Bhagat Phul Singh Women University in Sonipat, Haryana state. So that is the only women university in North India. And as a Vice Chancellor, I will speak about my own experience that I have seen the girls growing in the university from the KG level to PhD. And it's right that the individual is very important, and woman has already empowered when she is born. That is what I have felt. She is not only given the space, the consideration, the significance, and it is our patriarchal society, and particularly in Haryana state, because the woman is the secondary in India and in globally also. That is what I have heard in the discussion. It is not India, so in other countries also. But in Haryana, so whatever is discarded, that goes to the girl in the family. So first it is the family that is to be fixed. The mindset, yes, whether it is food, whether it is the clothes to be worn, or whether it is the facility provided at home, the secondary things which is most disregarded, that goes to the girl. And so see, the number is changing now. It is the mindset. That second priority goes to the mindset, the society. First the family, and in family it is the mother, the woman itself. Mother has a power. She is the Janani in our Indian philosophy. She is a creator, innovator, and she is an administrator. Wherever she is an administrator, she proves very successful. That is what I have felt. Whatever responsibility I have given to a woman administrator, as a teacher, as a dean, she has proved her mettle in comparison to a man. She is looking after the family as well and the office as well. So it is the individual that is to be fixed, the family, the mother first. And then the society, the male hierarchy, the mindset of the men in the society, that is to be changed. And give the space to a woman and she will flourish. And she is flourishing, I'm sure about it. We are giving all facilities to the girls. They go to the villages, nearby villages, and they interchange their ideas. They literate the rural women regarding all legal issues, regarding education, their rights and their powers. And I have seen them conversing with the women ladies and making them empowered, the girl students. So, thank you.
So we've moved on from fixing the individual to fixing the family.
And in the family, it is the mother first, because in our patriarchal society, the bringing of a child, the whole responsibility goes to the mother. The father is for the outside of the home, and the mother is meant for staying within the four walls of the house. So it is the mother who has to look for the growing of the girl child. So the empowerment comes from home, that starts from home. What kind of education, what kind of facility she is to be given. So that is the point, and it is very significant. Because she is always graded as a second rate in the family. Whatever kind of responsibility is to be given, no, she is a girl, it is, he is a boy, let him go there. Let him do it, not she. So this is the responsibility of the woman itself.
So coming back to the point we were talking about earlier, it starts in childhood. It starts with the society structures, it starts with the family structures, it starts with the role of the mother. And I think, as Jude Kelly mentioned this morning, also the role of the father.
Yeah. So we as women, as mother, we have to empower ourselves first.
Yeah, and just coming back on that is that I think that there is a rethinking to be done in society and in different cultures, because the difference I've observed between the Western culture and the Eastern culture is the sanctity of the family. And the way we have actually gone forward in encouraging more economic independence for women in the West has sometimes compromised the family. Now, that is something that you wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, literally, on that one. So in thinking what we want to do, I think we ought to be focusing on a balance between what we want in the family context, whatever the family is defined as, and what we want in work, and what we want as economic independence. Because you just don't want to just shift from one space to another and lose the advantage of the first one. So it's yes, change and go forward, but save the best of what is and build on it.
I think the point that she's making is that in the Indian context, when a lot of women stay at home to rear the child or look after the children and don't work, don't go out of the house to work, it is the role of the mother to be able to impart the right values to the children. And therefore, I think the point that ma'am is making is that we need to be able to fix the mindset of the woman in the house to be able to give the equality amongst the children. So if she does not emphasize in the family that the girl and the boy is equal, they grow up thinking
Believing
differently.
that they're not.
Yes, that's right.
I'm not disagreeing with anything anybody has said, but I was just reflecting on the journey of, again, my life. I grew up in Malaysia, and I left Malaysia when I was 17 to go to England because my mother thought education was important. I didn't grow up with a father. I grew up in a divorced family, so big stigmatization. I was the only child. So I didn't have a father's role model, so no negativity, no positivity either from a father. I had a mother who clearly believed in education, and she eventually came to live with me in UK. Now, for somebody who's an ethnic minority, a migrant, making it in the UK, it's big. I didn't realize how big it was until now, because the colonial mindset and the issues of East and West are all still there, including my gender, including the fact I have no family structure, apart from my mother. Now, when I got married, she said to me, and this is where the East never goes away, she said to me, "Why are you working? Your husband can look after you." And I thought, Mom, well, my mother's a teacher, was a teacher, she's no longer here. So all I think from that story is life is very complex. And whatever strategies you use, you will have to keep changing and maneuvering them depending on who's in that situation with you. And that maybe is why we're still developing, because there is no one way. Every time you hit some wall or some success, another thing appears. And in my own mother's situation, she said, "Well, you're married now, why don't you?" And then, of course, people in the community said things to me like, "Now, if you were a good mother, you would give up your job." So there you are. So each step is complex.
I'm aware that people would like to make more comments, but I'm also very aware of the fact that we've run out of time in this session. I think, kind of listening to the points, I think I'd like to sum up by saying, actually, we hold responsibility ourselves as role models, as mothers, as mentors, as people who can drive the change through demonstrating and encouraging the type of behaviours that we think are going to be needed in the modern world. We don't quite know yet what that modern world is going to look like in 10, 20 years' time. It may be very differently structured. All we can do is try to look to the next generation to encourage them to build that creativity, build that flexibility, and that's equal to boys and to girls, and to create the opportunity through equality. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists. I think they've had a fantastic input into this session. We haven't quite come up with the answers yet, apart from there's a lot of work we have to do, but we all have to take responsibility for it. So thank you very much to my panelists, and thank you to you as well for your questions. I believe now what we're doing is there's a very quick turnaround before we come back with the rest of the groups to kind of close off some of the discussions we've had today.